Jazz, and you're listening to Giving Up the Ghost podcast. Thank you so much for coming back. Tonight's episode is called Looking for Ghosts, Searching for Ghosts at the Lower Fort Garry. Back in October, we had the privilege to come out and record a bunch of episodes during their ghost walks, and tonight's episode is primarily our sacrifice, Theressa, who kindly recorded her ghost walk on her phone. So we've edited it together and we have it for your listening pleasure for tonight. The cool thing about tonight's episode, and I'll put them in the show notes, that I did find a couple of questionable noises or voices. So check that out. So cool when that happens and you're like, did I really hear that? Is that really what that is? Anyway, we're hoping to be together again, Sharon and I, in the next few weeks. Fishing season is over for her, so I get my pod partner back and we're going to record. We have some episodes, some topics put together and ready on the burner. Can't wait to share those with you, including if you've caught some of the videos that we've been putting together on YouTube. Highway ghosts, that's a thing, and that's creepy cool for sure. Also, we have some big announcements coming up. Hopefully in the next week or two, our Spirits with Spirits tour will be kicking off. Exciting, exciting, exciting. So hopefully you can be involved and come out and check that once we have the details ready to go. So I think that's about it. Also too, we'll be appearing at the Mediums, Mystics, and Mindfulness Market, which is going to be held back again at the Four Crowns Convention Center on McPhillips, and that's going to be March 23rd and March 24th, noon to 7 p.m. So this is a cool event where you get to come out. A lot of cool vendors with merch, and also there's going to be like intuitives, mediums, tarot readers, and they have sort of like a bit of a cheaper rate, or give you sort of like a snippet of what the full services that they can offer. So they're there for you. And we'll be there, of course, as usual, recording your ghost stories. So I would highly encourage you to come out. Please say hi. We've met some of our biggest fans doing this. Shout out to Gavin and Keith. So cool. And yeah, I think that is it for notifications. As always, keep in touch with us on Facebook. We're really, really big on Facebook. So reach out to us, message us. If you've got a ghost story, certainly contact us at givinguptheghostpodcast@gmail.com. And yeah, so again, we're hoping to get things rolling. A lot of really cool plans, a lot of really cool things in the works. So watch out for all of that. Can't divulge too much at this time, as is. In saying that, thank you again for listening to our podcast. And even though we haven't quite been recording or having episodes lately, again, we were number 1 on FeedSpot's top 10 paranormal Canadian podcasts. Thank you so much. Great honor. All right, so listen to tonight's Ghost Walk with Theressa, and remember to live every day like it is your last, but never give up the ghost.
So, where we're standing right now is the guest house. In the days of the Hudson's Bay Company, when it operated this place as a fur trading post, this was what was called a transshipment depot. So there would be a lot of boat traffic coming through here, and occasionally a higher up member of the company, an officer. And so they would put him up in this room as like a nice little place to stay. However, this place has a dark secret. As you see, in 1963, when Parks Canada was undergoing renovations on this site to turn it into a National Historic Site that we know now, it was the job of 2 men to take care of this building. So these men, they were in collections, and so they pored over old photographs for hours, making sure everything in here was perfect, down to the last detail. The curtains hung up just so, the tea set out exactly as they would have, and the furniture arranged like no one had ever left. So satisfied with their work, they left and they locked the door behind them.
Thing in the corner.
Now, they returned the next day to find that all of their work had been undone. The curtains were ripped off, the china set was smashed, and the furniture had been rearranged completely. And in the center of it all was a rocking chair, not unlike that one. It was moving back and forth. So as the men approached it, they began to make out the figure of a little girl looking no older than 10 years old. When they approached her, she looked up at them and she said, "I'm so sorry for the mess." And so the men, they go tearing out of the building. They lock it behind them. They go running to their colleagues. They tell them what had happened. They just get laughed at. They say, You guys, you probably just locked some poor prankster in the building. Come on, let's go check it out. But when they re-enter the building, it was like everything was like they left it last night. Like no one was in there. Now the men had known what they'd seen. And so, happy that everything was back, they were still a little rattled. They went to a fair that night to get their minds off of it. But while they were there, they encountered a medium. And this medium's offered that, she could come to this building, see if she could detect the presence of a spirit that could be haunting it. Out of options, the men agreed, and so they let her in. She walked into the center of the room, though, and she froze. She says, "Has anyone ever had a leg amputated in this building?" Men, they're a little puzzled. They're not the historian, so they have a general knowledge, but not anything super in-depth. They say, "Well, no, not to our knowledge." "Why?" The woman says, I feel like my left leg is missing." So the men their curiosity has been piqued. They go diving through old archives. They find old reports from archaeologists who had dug up around the site. One of them, in fact, he decided he was going to stay the night in the building. I don't know, I guess to avoid the long drive back or get an early start on the next day. But the whole night he was kept up by the sound of furniture being moved and scraped along the floor. Now, they also found a bone, and it looked like it had been amputated. So the men kept reading and realized, this must have been what the woman was talking about. But when they read the record, they found there was something odd about this bone. Not that it was amputated. That was a pretty common treatment for things like frostbite, gangrene, infection in the 1800s. No. This was unusual because it looked like it had been sawn about halfway and then snapped off. So they keep reading, completely puzzled as to why this building has such a dark history. And then they find it. In the 1870s, this building was used as a sort of quarantine for people sick with tuberculosis. Most of them made a full recovery, except for one. A little girl, about 8 years old. Woo!
Wow!
Yes. We'll keep
We're actually local people, farmers, craftsmen, basically who would join up with the brigades in the summer to earn a couple extra bucks before fall and the harvest comes. But one of these farmers was a man named Jean-Louis, who was a local Métis man, known pretty widely throughout the community for his great sense of humor, his even better singing voice, and, his pet wolf. Now, it was only a cub. He had found it while walking out in the woods one day, and it was snared in a trap, but he had set it free, and he had raised it. And the two of them were like peas in a pod. They went everywhere together, on walks, hunting, and even the wolf cub, or as Jean-Louis called him, Tilou, even slept on the foot of his bed. Every summer when Jean-Louis would embark on the boats to go north with the rest of the company's supplies, it would be Tilou who would be the last one to see him off, running along the bank of the river till his little legs couldn't carry him anymore. Just like that, every time Jean-Louis would come back, it was Tilu who was always the first one to greet him. Except one summer when Jean-Louis departed, and fall came, he didn't come back. And so Tilu, he continued to wait down there by the boat launch. He waited, in the sun and in the rain and the snow and the hail, until one day the sleeper was going down to the boatyard to do some repairs on some of the boats who had come in. And he notices something in the bush. Carefully brushing some aside, he sees it's Tilu, and he had died waiting. And some people say that in the fall, when the moon is full, that some of the howling you hear is not just coyotes. Some people say that one of them is Tilu, and that he's still waiting for his master to come home.
Like that Futurama episode.
I'm sorry about that one. That's a bit of a downer, right? Yeah, don't worry. The next one is a little bit more exciting. Lower Fort Garry is where we represent all the First Nations who are coming to do business and trade with the fort. This story takes place long before the arrival of the Hudson's Bay Company. So this story, it's a little bit more famous. Has anybody heard of a Wendigo before? Yes. So, this story, like I said, takes place long before the arrival of the Hudson's Bay Company, during a bitterly cold storm, one that had been lasting for weeks. The local community of First Nations were camped in the area, and they were beginning to run out of food. This was a problem because they couldn't hunt. The storm had seemed to drive away all the animals. They couldn't find anything. But one of their hunters decided he was going to take it upon himself to find something, anything, to help get his community through the winter. And so he sets out into the Sea of White. Eventually, he comes across a forest. Goodest place of any, he thinks. If there are any animals that are trying to seek shelter from the storm, maybe they're in here. So he enters. As he goes deeper and deeper in the forest, looking on the ground for footprints, loose fur, broken twigs, any sign of life, really, he doesn't see anything. And as he goes, he notices the trees. They get older, darker, branches snaking out, blocking out the sky like twisted limbs and bony fingers. He shudders. He keeps going. Until eventually, he comes across a fair set of footprints. They're not footprints of any animal. These look like the footprints of a man. I mean, they're much longer, and each toe looks like has the impression of a claw, caked in blood. He freezes. His mind races back to stories his father told him while he sat on his knee around a fire when he was a child. See, the Wendigo, it's not a natural creature. It's not born like a wolf or a bear. No. This thing is created, or rather it is cursed, upon people who consume human flesh. The most sinister part about them is not that they will gobble you up whole, it's that they can make you into a Wendigo. And you too will be cursed to roam the land, forever starving, never, ever finding enough. And that's when he hears the telltale sound. It's the hissing breathing of a Wendigo. And on the back of his neck, he feels something drip, drip, drip. He puts his hand back to see what it is. It's red, it's sticky, it's blood. He looks up into the tree and he sees it there, perched like a vulture, 8 feet tall, skin and bone, eyes as black as coal, with a mouth with no lips, just revealing row upon row of sharp, bloody teeth. and it stares down at him and licks its teeth with a forked tongue. So he jumps back, he takes his spear and he throws it at it, nails it square in the chest. It comes tumbling from the tree. It's a textbook shot. And it just gets up, looks at it, breaks it off, licks its own blood off the tip of the spear and bares its teeth in some sort of twisted smile. And so he loses all composure. He begins to run deep into the woods, dives in between trees and into crevices. Eventually he finds a good hiding spot in some bushes and covers himself with snow. He knows that it doesn't have great eyesight, but its smell will eventually give him away. So he steadies his nerves, prepares an ambush. You can hear it coming. Its footprints getting closer and the hissing, breathing noises. Gets so close that he can smell the stench coming off of its breath. He fights every urge, every instinct telling him to get up and keep running until it's right on top of him. He strikes! He jabs it in the eyes and in the mouth and in the ears and the temple, anything soft that he can get at. He grapples it and tackles it to the ground. He keeps stabbing it again and again until eventually it lets out one last roar of pain and it stops fighting. He steps back and realizes he knows the face of this Wendigo. This was the face that 2 years ago a hunter and his partner had gone out into the woods alone. But only the hunter had come back. So everyone knew what had happened, so they banished him. The hunter had basically confirmed their worst fears. He had become a Wendigo. So, not wanting to press his luck, he starts to head back. As he walks away, he sees the wet corpse of the Wendigo, and it dissolves to ash, indistinguishable from the snow that surrounded it. As he continues to walk, he feels like a failure, like the community won't make it. Then I see something walking through the bush straight towards him. It's no other Wendigo, it's a deer. It comes right up to him. It was like nature itself was offering a bounty for ridding the world of this vile evil. So he kills it, says a prayer of thanks, and he takes it back to his community. The meat lasts them through the rest of the storm. But he always made sure to tell everyone, and his children, especially when they sat around the fire together, that if you're alone in the woods, and you see bloody footprints, and you hear the sound of hissing, run.
This next building right here.
Blacksmith interpreters. Because, fun fact, this is not the original blacksmith shop. This is a recreation. So this story is part of the reason why. Well, I'll set the scene. It's about 1875, and it's Victoria Day. So everyone's in a great mood. They're getting ready for a big party. They're bringing out the drinks. They're setting up a dance floor, getting musicians. Only thing missing are some fireworks, get some action. Except Lower Fort Garry is still a little out of the ways. The fireworks are not easy to come by here. But hey, not to worry. We have a blacksmith, and they have been pulling a party trick for generations, pretty much as long as gunpowder has been in Europe. It's called blowing the anvil. So what you do, take an anvil, you flip it upside down, and they're hollow to absorb the shock. But this is where the gunpowder comes in, because you pack it full of gunpowder. You fill it up, attach a fuse, stack another anvil on top, this time right side up. You light the fuse, you run like heck, and then boom! Sends the anvil straight into the air, sometimes 100 yards. It's really fun. I highly recommend watching some videos on YouTube. If it's done properly, that is. Because you can guess by, this is a ghost tour. This did not go as planned. As you see, the blacksmith, he was very busy. He had a lot of projects to do, so he delegated it to a friend of his. Friend set up in this field just on the other side of the blacksmith shop, poured in the gunpowder. A bit of a crowd was starting to gather. He was feeling a bit nervous. But, tries to focus, attaches a fuse, stacks the other anvil on, strikes a match once, twice, 3 times, but it breaks and it falls in, and then bang! There's a huge explosion. A crater is created in that field, and it takes half the blacksmith shop with it, and unfortunately claims the lives of the man, 2 children, and the blacksmith himself. Now, on the night of Victoria Day, people walking around the site have noticed that if you're quiet, you can hear the sound of a hammer striking an anvil about 3 times before it stops. The sound of something soft but heavy hits the floor of the blacksmith shop. Now, I think our blacksmith has some unfinished work, wouldn't you?
We're just going to be heading into this room. I believe these chairs are okay to sit on as long as you're not pulling the ones with the cobwebs on them. But, I don't know if you want to. I mean, the service here looks terrible. This guy looks like he's been waiting here forever. But yes, so this here is the big house. So this is where all the upper class, officers of the company would be staying. But this is also the place where another medium has come through. In fact, one of many. Lower Fort Garry, with all of our ghosts, we've had quite a few mediums come through the site, but we're always pretty suspicious when they do. Just being a national historic site, a lot of the information about us, including some of our ghost stories, can be found pretty easily online, so we don't like to give them any easy win. This next story takes place not that long ago, and it's one that, well, let's just say it kind of made everyone believe a little bit. So, sitting around this table were a bunch of Parks Canada staff. One of them, a man named Matt, he was the interpretation coordinator, so he's the guy in charge of all the people in costume here during the summer. Now, the medium was sitting right here where this fine gentleman is right now, and that was about right here. And so, the medium concentrates, tries to make contact with the spirit. After a while, she does. She says, the spirit, feels like an officer of some kind, maybe military? Now, Matt kind of shakes his head at this. Lower Fort Garry, despite its name Lower Fort Garry, it was never a military fort. This was a trading post. The Hudson Bay Company to trade for furs. And so while we did have officers here, they were not officers in the sense of like a military or something like that. And so when Matt explained it to this woman, she says, okay, but this man, he feels like someone who's in charge, someone who gives orders. He offers suggestions of who it could be, maybe someone like a governor, Mr. Coville, or Mr. Baladin, but she says, no, this man he's in a uniform. He says he wants to talk to the man in the red coat. Everyone looks around the table. They're all wearing Parks Canada uniforms. The official color of Parks Canada is green, so no one's wearing red. They all look at each other puzzled and kind of like get over to this person. And so they say, well, no one's wearing a red coat. Medium says, well, what he says he wants to tell the man in the red coat is that he wants to thank him for representing him and telling the story of what they did here. So Matt shrugs. And then the night pretty much ends there. They thank the medium for coming, and then everyone goes home feeling maybe a little disappointed. But the next day, in the morning meeting, when Matt is prepping everyone for one of their busiest days of the week, Children's Day, where they've got a bunch of activities set up, and so it's all hands on deck. Even Matt is in costume today. And to cut the tension, he tells the story of what happened last night about. And the ghost said she wanted to talk to the man in the red coat, how it was laughable. But then an interpreter in the back raises her hand and she says, "Matt, look at what you're wearing." And sure enough, Matt was dressed like he was every Wednesday, as a Northwest Mounted Police officer. Because you see, Lower Fort Garry was actually the first training ground of the Northwest Mounted Police before they rode west. And being a very new organization, they didn't have their own uniform yet. So they wore British Army surplus. Now what is the iconic feature of the British Army at this time? A red coat, exactly.